Focus is crucial. And so if you're seeing all this negative stuff, what pages are you following? Who can you follow that bring you more
We all
joy?
have stuff in our lives that doesn't work out.
This is life. Whatever it is, decide on your career, believe in that decision, begin doing something about it, and become that.
Welcome back to the Empower You podcast.
Yes, with Brent Williams and Byron Dempsey.
Season 2, episode 2. This is another exciting one. Kind of similar, it's mindset.
Yeah.
Which again is the most important thing. Because so much of, even the money section is about mindset, your relationship, mindset, money. But this is pillar number 2, above the line, below the line. Now, I know when you talk about pillar number 2, Brent, you've said you've done surveys with people and you've said that this is the biggest idea of the entire program on average for most people.
It is, yeah. There's no close second, which is interesting in itself because I'd argue there's so many wonderful ideas and concepts that so many people resonate with in different ways. So that this is universally the big one. I think is interesting and I obviously validates its importance. And so I guess we'll do the quick story that sets this idea up.
Yes.
And let's unpack it in its entirety. So the first book that I wrote was called The World of Your Feet. And in The World of Your Feet, it covers the 7 keys to success. And let's do an episode just on the 7 keys because it's a good conversation to have. This story is about the first key, which is about stepping up to the plate. And it's a story of 2 brothers that have an abusive and alcoholic father. And so their childhood is very disturbing, challenging. They get beaten a lot. And one brother grows up to be just like his dad, real troublemaker in school, ends up getting put in jail for 10 years for attempted murder. And the second brother grows up very differently, not a straight A student, but, solid. Graduates, goes to university, marries his sweetheart, has a couple of children, gets a massive management job making over $100,000 a year. Now, this is in the 1970s. So you factor in inflation, we're talking about close to $500,000 a year pay packet. Now, a journalist that lives in this area finds out about this story and thinks, isn't this fascinating? We had these 2 brothers with very different outcomes, but the same upbringing. What's the difference? So she interviews both of the brothers, firstly going to the one in jail and asks him one question. Why did you turn out the way you did? This brother's answer was immediate. He slams his fist on the table and he says, how could I turn out any differently with a father like that? And I guess sitting here, we could understand why he'd have that response.
Of course.
A few days goes by and the journalist goes to the house of the second brother, the successful one. And she poses the same question. Why did you turn out the way you did? And this brother reflected and he looked at her and he said, how could I turn out any differently with a father like that? Isn't that interesting? 2 brothers, same upbringing, totally contrasting outcomes in life. But when asked that question, they have the same answer. And so as we unpack that, why do they have the same answer? Well, fundamentally, the brother in jail gave that answer because he blamed his father. So he blamed his dad. So how could I turn out any differently with a father like that? He made excuses for himself, which was his father. How could I turn it differently? And he was in denial of the reality he was in. The second brother, the successful one, well, he took accountability. So meaning it is because of his father, he took ownership for his life and shifted away from that. He took responsibility for his life. Again, his father was a catalyst for him to take responsibility and he took ownership. So they were both right in their answers with totally contrasting outcomes because the first one blamed others, made excuses and was in denial. And the second one took accountability, responsibility and ownership. And so the concept here is this. We are always on a ladder. Imagine for anyone listening, watching this podcast, you're on a ladder from the day you're born to the day you die. Now you're moving up and down this ladder. And there are certain things that dictate why you go to the top versus why you go to the bottom. And imagine next to this ladder, in the middle, there's a line. So essentially you're either climbing above this line on this ladder or below this line. And so again, below the line is blame, excuses, denial. Above the line is accountability, responsibility, and ownership. So the question that you want to ask yourself is, which side of the line have you spent more of your life? Have you spent 51% or more of your life above the line or 51% or more of life below the line? Now, when asked this question, and I probably have asked this question to live audiences in the vicinity of around 100,000 people across, the Empower Yous and live seminars. When I ask this question, where have you spent most of your time? It is incredible that universally, I would say 95% of the audience will say, I've spent more of my time below the line. Now, that honest admission to me is quite revealing. It does a couple of things. One, it makes people realize, I need to take more ownership. It also tells everyone that people are acutely aware whether they're taking responsibility or not. It's not I don't know, I need to think about it. It's a considered thought. Have I not? Everyone knows.
Especially when you lay it out so vividly.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. And so the idea around the playing above the line is the more things that you take accountability, responsibility, and ownership for, the greater your circle of influence becomes. Now, John Maxwell, the world's leading authority on leadership, says that the definition of leadership is influence. So your ability to lead is your ability to influence. Your ability to influence is your ability to lead. And so when we talk about the circle of influence, imagine you've got this imaginary circle, this bubble around you. Everything inside that circle, you take accountability, responsibility, and ownership for, and everything outside of the circle, you do not. So for example, I would ask someone, are you responsible for brushing your teeth? They go, yeah, of course. Okay, so that's in the circle. So you're not waiting there going, Mum, I'm ready. So you do it yourself. Another thing would be, do you make your way to school or work? Yes, you do. Okay, so it's in the circle. Maybe another thing is, do you pay all the bills at home? No, I don't. Okay, so that's outside the circle. So it's not something you're responsible for. Now, this is not a right or wrong comment, and that's a really important distinction to make. Most people go, hey, are you saying I'm wrong? I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just the outcome you get. What is the outcome you get? And so the idea is personal empowerment is your ability, or lack of, to grow your circle of influence. And there's a line I always love to use, and that is, not everything's your fault, but it becomes your responsibility. Something you mentioned in the last episode.
It's a big one. And I think, I was actually thinking about this today when I was like going for a walk. I was just like, I always ask people, what's the number one advice you give to the younger self? And I'm always scared of someone to ask me that because there's so many things I want to cover. I remember there's a question, it's like, what's the biggest mistake you think young people are making? I think the biggest mistake young people are making is they're making excuses that are justified. Everyone knows we're making excuses. The issue this generation struggles with, and why above the line, below the line is so good, because we're pointing out that all your excuses are justified. Yes, he had an abusive father. It's not surprising he turned out like that. If that's all we heard, we go, okay, that's fair enough. And so whatever issues you have, it might be justified. And that's where it gets dangerous. Oh, you can justify. But it's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome. That's something you just need to like tattoo on yourself. Like that should be on your wall. Like it's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome. And ultimately, what do we want? The outcome.
Yeah.
And so stop thinking about right or wrong. It's like, oh, but the traffic was, there's heaps of traffic. There's a car crash. I couldn't get here on time. You could have left earlier. So why don't you just like leave early or go to a cafe beforehand? You know, we'll filter in a bunch of stories here to drive this point home. But I think my key point with this is, yes, you can make excuses and they'll be true, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's true, because it's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome. Just like over and over again. Like that's such a good quote. Probably one of my favorite.
Look, so much of what you said there spurred some other thoughts. And you're right. You know, like so often a victim mentality is a mentality that will share a story to justify an action or an inaction. Like you said, oh, well, you know, it's my mother's fault. It's my school's fault. It's my teacher's fault. It's the pandemic's fault. And you can justify it. But does that justification change or better your results? It doesn't. And, you know, self-pity is a waste of time. Nobody appreciates it. And I always say in a seminar, like, don't give me a story to justify poor behavior, because I'm not going to give you a pat on the back for it. You know, we can have excuses or results. We can't have the both. And that's why I think the brother story is so powerful, because people get that. Go, yeah, you're right. Like they both justified in their answer, but they have very different outcomes. So what outcome do you want? What outcome do you want? And I think it's pretty obvious. You want the latter, not the former, in that, you know, you don't want your past experiences to make you bitter. You want them to make you better, to improve your situation, to use those moments as catalysts for change, rather than an excuse to justify poor behavior. And this is all down to mindset.
It's just the but, isn't it? It's but. Like I've spoken to people one-on-one about this idea, and they went but. Like I use the bus example, right? We always use the example of, if it's Monday, you're going to go to school, the bus is 10 minutes late, you rock up to school 10 minutes late. So you say to your teacher, oh, miss, I'm sorry, the bus was late. And she goes, whatever, sit down. Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's Friday. The buses come late every single day. It's Friday, the 5th day in a row. You walk in, your teacher, you know, rolls her eyes and you say, I'm sorry, miss, the bus was late. Or do you say, I'm sorry, miss, I should have been on time? And then we get everyone to go, if the bus is late all the time, how can we take responsibility for that? And again, we did a TikTok of this and everyone was going, but. I've told the story to someone and she's like, but what if they can't afford to, what if their parents leave to go really early? And I say, okay, what about this? And they go, but what about this? Okay, but what about this? But. And it's like, oh my God. Okay, maybe if we're talking about someone who's like, in another third world country who has all these things, sure. But we're talking to Australians, and the group we're talking to don't have the excuse. I believe there are people in this world, probably billions of people that genuinely have an excuse.
There's always outliers. This is what we call mismatches. People that will look for the reason to justify the exception over the rule. And it's like, okay, well then just give up then.
But then you can't say anything ever because I'll go, what about this person? It's like, what?
Oh,
we can't give advice ever. And that is the issue with TikTok. Like we don't have control of who it's going to.
That's right.
Whereas in Empower You, we know who we're talking to. And this concept is absolutely applies to anyone in Australia. Like you don't have the excuse.
Let me just say this point, and I feel like the point I'm about to make now deserves its own episode, but it's something that I'm saying a lot more in the careers section when we talk about following recipes. And I also talk about in goals is that, you know, the TikTok that went viral for me, that hugging one, got a lot of hate. Like, I mean, it got 1.4 million views. And a lot of it, like the comments were around hugging and, you know, should be whatever it was, but it was very negative. And then some of the comments I jumped in defending Ishana for that one. And then people biting back at me is a couple things. One, the first comment is, people generally that are spewing hate online aren't looking to be corrected. But the bigger point that I want to make that probably deserves more airtime is, and this is what I found to be true, rarely in life will you get criticism or judgment or negative feedback from those that have the results that you want.
It's true.
And it's the ones that will criticize, judge, look for the exception, the rule. What about this? What about this? They're not the ones that are winning in life. They're not the ones you go, that's someone I want to follow their recipe. That's someone who's on the path. There's no one. Like, could you imagine, say, Richard Branson saying, oh, yeah, no, there should be excuses and, oh, they're justified. He wouldn't be saying that at all. He'd be totally subscribing to what we're talking about here. And this is all down to mindset. So people with a poor mindset will look to justify, look for excuses because it makes them feel more comfortable in their lack of action.
And it justifies why they're not doing it.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, they did this. Oh, but they bought a property. Oh, but they're richer than me. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome.
Yeah.
That's true. But that doesn't mean you also can't buy a property. And a property is a great example, actually, because look, the average price in Sydney is 1.4 million. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And so a lot of young people are going, oh, there's no points. I don't have the money. We can't do it. And it's true. It is very, very difficult in the property market, but it's still possible. Yeah. It's still possible. But many people just write it off. And they're justified because it is very expensive. But there's still ways to get in. You know, working with the right people, buying somewhere that's not in Sydney and buying your third property in Sydney by the time you're 30, 35, that's a whole other story, right? But you can see this once you understand the above the line, below the line mentality, you see it everywhere. And you see it in everything you do, in sports as well. I shared a story, I don't know if you were there. I read it from my book, my fantasy book. And it was between a king, and this king is like he's only been a king for a year. He's softy. He's not a very good king. And he's got this advisor who's like teaching him how to be a king. And she's just like, Ellen, everything that happens is your responsibility in this kingdom. If an earthquake hits, that's your responsibility. If a fire hits, that's your responsibility. Absolutely everything is your fault and your responsibility, and you have to take ownership for that. It was basically reading the above line, below the line. And I loved it. And it was so true. Like because I'm very hyper aware of it, you just see it everywhere. And it's very frustrating when people are like making excuses.
Yeah. I can't stand excuses. And, you know, I also want to add this point. This is a bit of a disclaimer for those that misinterpret this idea. A lot of people think that taking ownership and then justifying why something didn't work out is taking ownership. It's actually not. And I'll give you an example. Like someone recently was going to a meeting, an arranged meeting, and they were 5 minutes late. They didn't say why they were late. They didn't apologize, nothing. Then after it, the friend of mine that had set up the meeting said, you know, they were late. And they didn't say why. I said, that's disappointing because it's the little things like that that speak volumes. And so I asked this person, you know, you were late. You didn't say anything. And they're like, yeah, well, I was on time, but then I couldn't find where the room was. And I couldn't find, and there was this traffic thing. So I planned to be on time, but so they were like justifying to me that they were on time, but they weren't. So they're saying, well, I did the right thing, but it just didn't work out for me. It was other external circumstances beyond my control. And then I said, well, you still should say, I'm sorry I'm late, because you're late. So they then went back and said, I'm sorry I'm late, but then justified with the story. I said, well, you're not taking ownership then. All you should say is, I'm sorry I'm late. That's it. Yeah. I'm sorry I'm late. It won't happen again. Not, I'm sorry I'm late. Let me tell you why I'm late. I don't give a fuck why you were late. You were late.
And it's I think it's a real sign of intelligence and respect to just own it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm late. That was my fault. I should have given myself more time.
That's it.
Especially if you say that, they can be like, oh, that's fine. I make that mistake all the time. Rather than them, and then they're going, it's a completely different shift.
Yeah. I can't tell you like the amount of times like I'll be frustrated with someone in my team. But the moment they say, you're right.
Yeah.
They don't give me a bullshit story. Or the weather was wrong and I got up the wrong side of the bed and this happened. I stepped on a Lego and it made me, I don't give a fuck. What I want to know is you just taking ownership. My bad, because then there's a level of trust. It speaks to mindset, and it's everything. I mean, it's sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry. I just want to get this point because while we're on that story of the person who's late, right? Do you think it's a coincidence that people who are like successful in doing stuff in life are never late? They still have the same traffic as you. They still have all the other issues, but why they happen to be on time? If it wasn't your fault and it was a traffic, it was you couldn't find the room or whatever story, how come other people seem to make it on time?
Yeah.
Because they gave themselves 10 minutes. Every time I go somewhere, I give myself, I know I'm going to be able to find it. Especially if I'm in a city, all right, 20 minutes for parking, another 10 to find the place.
Yeah.
Because if I get there early, I'll just go to the cafe, I'll sit on my phone, bring my laptop.
There's nothing wrong with being early. Let's emphasize that. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing that's going to hurt you in your life by being early to something.
Yes.
You got to wait a little bit longer. And like you said, you got a phone now. So you got a distraction.
Yeah.
You can sit there and do extra work or watch TikTok videos, whatever it is. Yeah, it is true. Like I will always be on time early, usually early, because you're never exactly on time if you plan to be on time. So you always be early. And here's the kicker. If you're going to be late, manage someone's expectation.
Yes. Oh, for
and that's
sure.
taking ownership about being late. So if you know you're going to be 10 minutes late, as early as you can saying, it looks like I'm going to be later than I anticipated.
Yeah.
My apologies. I'll be here at this time. Problem solved.
I mean,
Problem solved.
for my program, I've been offering one-on-one calls to get to meet everyone. Now there's 85 people in my program. Do the math. It's a full work week of just calls. And they're all spread out and everything. And then half of them, not half, maybe 1/3 don't even book them. Free coaching call. That's fine. Less work for me. Disappointing, but that's fine. And then, most people rock up, but I've had a good amount not. And all the ones who miss it, it's actually insane. Number one, they often don't even tell me and they haven't even apologized yet. Obviously some people be, hey, sorry, I missed it. Can we rebook and everything? But like, I've got people who have just not even shown up and just not even apologized. I'm like, what's going on?
And you know what? Here's the thing. They think it doesn't matter, but you know what? They've just created a poor image for you.
Yeah.
And then paying you this money to do the course. If I was paying you the money, I'd want to stand out. I'd be like, yes, Byron, let's have the call. Byron, I love you. I'm a big fanboy, whatever.
Yeah.
Because guess what? When we catch up in that social thing, who are you going to spend more time with, me or some bozo that blew you off?
I mean, I should have shared this for Do More Than Is Asked of You, but I did it before I met you. I did a presenting course, $6,500 it cost me. It was 6 days, about $1,100 a day. 9 o'clock till 6 o'clock. It was in a city. Takes me an hour and a half to get in the city. It was actually not far from where I live now, annoyingly. And I remember there was a challenge. He said he created something called a 3-minute dedication, which is where a word perfect scripted. When you get asked, "Who are you?" and you've got 3 minutes, this is your story. And it's very, he takes you through like a time jump. You go, 5 years ago, I was this, 2 years ago, I was this. Now here's what I do. Here's my goal, blah, blah, blah. And it's word perfect, but it's supposed to sound like you've just done it off the cuff.
Yeah.
And so you memorize this. The 10-minute version is not memorized. The 20-minute version is not memorized, but 3-minute is. And so we learned that on like day 1 or day 2. And then he says, when you go home tonight, I want you to film yourself doing it with no practice, just doing your first attempt, put it up onto YouTube, then send us a link. And then once we've practiced it, we're going to want you to refilm it, send it to us, and whoever's improved the most is going to get to come up and do it live to everyone.
Wow,
and they'll get
okay.
$1,100 worth of value and a free 1-hour coaching call with Ben, the guy. And I said, I'm going to win that. And I remember I was like, I'm going to win this so easy because I reckon only 3 people here will even do it. And I was exactly right. I think out of 45 people, 5 people actually filmed it and sent it in. And
What a
joke.
joke.
And do you know
What a joke. They're paying $6,000. What are you paying it for? You're just throwing the money away.
I was because I get home by like 8 o'clock. I was shattered. It was the first time I ever had a migraine was after this. I was shattered, but I was like, all right, I'm just going to film this thing. I looked wrecked. I film it on my phone. The next time I film it again, I win the prize. I go up on stage. I'm shitting myself. I do the presentation. And now everyone in that room knows who I am. And now I get to have a 1-hour chat with Ben. Now if I wanted to reach out to him, I could probably be like, hey, I was 20 when I did this. I won your thing. Do you remember me? He'd be like, oh, yeah, you're that guy. That's Do More Than Is Asked of You, but also living above the line. They kind of go in tangent, don't they?
Well, you're taking ownership for the outcomes you want. You could have justified. I was tired. My eyes are red.
I was so tired as
It's
well.
all justifiable. And you know what? Most people go, oh, yeah, you're right. That's okay. Rest up
Yeah.
and fail again. Like, it's incredible, the whole excuses and results idea around taking ownership for things.
Before you move on, actually, because that point's so important. If you've got people around you who keep justifying it, you're never going to grow. You're never going to, if every time you say, oh, this, they'll be like, oh, yeah, totally fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, the hard thing is, you kind of, and I've had to be it, you kind of be a dick sometimes. There's my one friend, and she still hasn't done it, and she knows who she is. She's filmed a podcast at the beginning of this year. And I said to her, we went to Bali together. And I said, Nat, you're launching your podcast. If it's not launched, you're not getting on that plane. And she was like, yes, this is what I need. Thank you. She didn't launch it. She got on the plane because I wasn't really going to kick her off the plane, of course. And then we said, you got to do it while we're in Bali. She didn't do it.
Imagine you get the captain to come, the captain
captain
kick her off. Apparently you didn't finish your podcast off the plane. Is this a lesson learned?
Yeah.
Yes.
But then I remember she was saying, she was justifying. And I called her out to her face because I knew that this was the relationship we had. I said, yeah, you're justifying. You're justifying. Everything you're saying is true. She's like, I need to be in a better space to do it, but you're never going to do it. And I said it. And she still hasn't launched it. And, I felt like a dick saying that. And she probably had a negative rest. Oh, Byron's being mean to me. It's like, yeah, but you need that. The people who are being mean to you are the ones that are just letting you down, justifying. They're nice in the short term and they don't have to be confronting or anything, but long term, they're just letting you down. And you'll probably never, ever know or never find out. Yeah. Many people will have died, not even realizing that. And that's where it's like, I think, I not only say it to my good friends, if I meet someone out and they're making excuses, I'm not going to be like, oh, is that an excuse?
Yeah, it's not for your place to say it. But for those that you really love, you let them know. Tough love is so important. And I think we're all so mollycoddled now.
You did it to me. Actually, and a great example of above the line, below the line is during the goal setting session, which is one of my favorite. You've seen me. I've almost rewritten the whole thing. I do this whole piece. I really love it. I love getting the horseshoe. I'm always like, oh, they're like, oh, we can't do the horseshoe. I'm like, please, can we do the horseshoe? Because I really love it. The issue is it's 5 o'clock. Everyone gets really tired doing that section. And there was a Sydney one where at the end of it, I was like, man, Brent, they've been such a good group, but they were just falling asleep and everything. And you literally said, yeah, that's your fault. Get them up, play a game, do this, do this. And I was like, it was such a little snap. I was like, yeah, what am I doing? I was like, I caught myself. I was like, what am I doing? I'm making excuses. And again, I was justifiable because it was 5 o'clock. They were tired. It had been a big day, blah, 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 blah. But for me, that was a good one. I was like, a good little snap for me that I always catch myself as a presenter now. Oh, they're tired, my fault.
And because if you don't take that ownership, then you're at the whim of the audience.
Yes.
You're always like, well, I might get a bad group here and the program's going to suck.
Exactly.
And then you're like, you got no control or ownership.
Yeah.
It's all about that. And, it's funny. I can't remember how the question was brought up, but I was speaking at it was literally on the weekend actually to all these parents and, they're saying, that's right, people coming, it's amazing that you've stayed through and you've continued this in spite of all the challenges of the last few years. The fact that you've persevered and grown, it's so commendable. And I'm thinking, what the fuck else was it going to do? Was it going to shut down the business? Was that what I would do? Was I just going to close shop and go, oh, well, that was too tough for me. I'll just go get a job. Like, it's interesting that I think for successful people, the fear of not being successful is what drives us. It's because we go, the consequences of not taking that action, the consequences of not starting at that podcast, the consequences of not doing that video, introing myself are that I'm validating I'm not good enough. I am buying into the story that I don't have the skill set to get to where I want to go. And then you just ask, what's the consequence of that? Well, instead of having a 10 out of 10 life, I might have a 5 out of 10. And I don't know why enough people don't do enough of that self-reflection to go, shit, the consequences of the lack of action of this, the consequences of the action of this. And when you start to weigh those scales and you constantly look at what is serving me and what is a disservice, it seems like the decision is, there is no decision. There's only one thing you should be doing, and it's the thing you said you would do. Well after the mood you set in is gone.
I mean, it's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome. You can have excuses or results. You can't have both. They're kind of the two above the line, below the line quotes that we sprinkle in that section, and they're phenomenal quotes. Like again, it's not about right or wrong. It's about outcome. And for me, that's the biggest one. Because I see so many excuses, and the issue is their excuses are justified. And when their excuses are justified, it's hard to get across this message. Yeah, because they're stuck in their own head. They're going, oh, but. Stop saying but.
Yeah,
that maybe that's a big one to add. I think. But. I don't care. We don't care. But why was I late? Oh, because of that. Doesn't matter. It's such a big point.
It's just, they've got to think about expanding this thinking to others of their life. What are the consequences? It's not going to work out for you. And at the end of the day, no one gives a shit. It's your life. Yeah. It's the thing that you need to take complete ownership of. And I want to add one more point before we wrap up is that when I talk about the circle of influence in relation to how big's your circle, in that how many things do you take accountability, responsibility versus blame or excuses? And I always say, like, hands up if you're responsible for the starving people in Africa. And you get maybe 1 or 2 people with their hands up. And then I'll say, well, what would you, if you were to take responsibility for that, what would you do? So people say, well, I guess I could donate some money. I could go do some aid work. I could raise awareness. I could be a better consumer. So we rattle off easily 5 to 10 examples. But then the point I make, which I think is important to highlight here, is that by taking ownership for the starving people in Africa, does that mean you have to solve the problem? No, it doesn't. What it does mean, though, is you're a part of the solution. And that's what taking ownership's all about. And if you want to be a part of the solution, I'm late for the bus. Well, what's the solution? I want to be part of the solution. Well, I'll get on a bike.
If 100 million people take that mentality, then that's where the solution gets solved.
Yeah.
But we do definitely have that, there's a problem. If I'm going to be part of it, I have to fix it. It's a great point. It's like just the same with the cleaning up the rubbish on the beach, right?
Yeah.
Or even voting. Just one vote, doesn't matter. But if everyone has that mindset, what's going to happen?
It's like at Empower You when I get revisits that come up to me and go, the grid's just not as good as last time. Well, do something about it. Do something about it. You can see I'm doing anything up on stage. Like, how can you not raise your team? Say, come on, guys, not good enough. Like, don't put it on me. Like, put it on yourself. And, I just think this is such a powerful idea. What's so powerful about it, what people really need to recognize is this is not punishing yourself. This is total freedom.
Yeah.
It's total freedom, because then when you really understand that you are everything you do will give you everything you want, and you have complete ownership versus putting it on anyone else, you have complete control of your life. You are the driver in the car, not the passenger. You're both on the journey, but on the driver, you dictate every turn. And I love that not everything's your fault becomes your responsibility, means that you can change anything in your life if you want to. And a victim will hate that.
It's victim versus victor, isn't it? I heard I think Brent and Byron talks about Viking versus victor, or Viking versus victim or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, are you a Viking? Strong, and or are you a victim? And most people are victims. They're justifying their excuses. So stop justifying excuses, live above the line. It's a mindset shift. This is the most important flip chart that we teach.
Yeah.
Not the most important, but the biggest impact.
Yeah, the one that everyone resonates with and acknowledges, and it really is so big. So every day, just ask yourself, are you justifying or are you taking ownership? And every day, the more ownership you take, the closer to your goals you'll become, because you'll naturally take the action required to get there.
And you do this, you're going to start seeing it the same way we see it everywhere. The advantage of us presenting is it's always front of mind. And it's been so good for me. And I will never present something I don't 100% do myself or believe in. It feels inauthentic to me.
Yeah, incongruent.
Yeah. And so for me, it's like, my friends will catch me out that. Are you living below the line, Byron, right now? And I'll be like, yeah, blah, blah, we'll take the piss. But yeah, it is an incredibly powerful idea to start living above the line. Any final points?
No, that's it.
I think
Love that one.
Yeah, great.
Nailed it.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Empower You podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. For more information on our live events, please head to www.empoweryou.com.au. We look forward to having you join us again for the next episode of the Empower You podcast.